Well, my name is Mike Mauceli, and this is the Energy Show with REI Energy, where we're energizing your investments and maximizing your tax deductions. Today, we're going to be discussing blockchains, bricks, and oil. You're going to discover how blockchain technology used to buy and sell oil and gas will impact the U.S. economy. My guest today is Lee Bratcher. Lee is the president and founder of the Texas Blockchain Council. Great to have you on the show today, Lee. I'd like to, start out talking to our listeners about, just what blockchain is and how does it work in the global energy market.
Well, Mike, thanks for having me on the show, and happy to share with your listeners a little bit about that. Blockchain and energy come together in what's called the proof of work consensus mechanism. And so not all blockchains use energy in their consensus mechanisms. Primarily, Bitcoin is the primary user of energy when it comes to this, because most other cryptocurrencies use different kinds of consensus mechanisms. So private permissioned enterprise blockchains, think IBM, they just use traditional consensus mechanisms that they don't require an inordinate amount of energy. But a proof of work consensus mechanism is really the one that we're talking about here at the intersection of blockchain and energy, and that's primarily Bitcoin. And so at its core, what these are distributed digital ledgers. They are the next iteration of double entry accounting and a way to account for assets on a digitally native or internet native platform. And so, think about Napster and how Napster broke the record label's business model by allowing digital streaming of music to sort of go around the traditional way of selling music to listeners. So Bitcoin is a way to create digital scarcity of an asset online without it being able to be replicated and without a centralized third party. And so the Bitcoin mining component of it is computers. They're called ASICs, application-specific integrated circuits, that are consuming energy in this process of securing the network. And they use the SHA-256 encryption algorithm that was developed by the NSA. And they're trying to guess a target number. These machines are throwing target numbers at this algorithm in an attempt to have the right to store the next block and add the next block to the blockchain. It would almost be like if you had 1,000-sided die, a die that had numbers on it from 1 to 1,000, and you were trying to roll a 1 or a 2, or any number under 3, right? So you're trying to roll a 1 or a 2 on that die, and there's 1,000 sides. It's going to take you quite a while. So these machines are working in a similar manner, and they do that in what would seem to be a waste of energy, but they do it in order to ensure that all of the other nodes on the network know that they're expending energy to attempt. This is not a free system. You have to expend energy to attempt to get that target number. And then once a miner or a machine is the one that solves that target number or is able to guess that target number, then all the other miners across the world are able to verify that and back check it very quickly. And that's how new transactions are added to the blockchain. So quite a long explanation, but that's how energy plays into blockchain.
Oh, I see. Yeah, it's a really fascinating topic and technology. A good friend of mine, Tom Wilwright, he says that blockchain is basically the accounting side of it, right? Bitcoin is I guess Bitcoin is the actual denomination. Is that correct?
That's right. So if you think about blockchain, I would just think about triple entry accounting or the next iteration of double entry accounting. And Bitcoin as an asset is simply just, they call them UTXOs, unspent transaction outputs. How much of the asset do you have? And the Bitcoin blockchain is what tracks who owns what of the asset.
So let me ask you a question, because I did watch one of your videos where you were basically talking about installing these facilities at say a producing oil well, and you were using the byproducts, I mean the natural gas, and to generate Bitcoin. I mean, how does that work? Is it just the natural gas is the energy, or can you get into a little bit of that?
That's right. Yeah. So the natural gas, whether it's from, if there's a pipeline there, you can actually use natural gas that's pipeline connected. Depending on, there's an arbitrage there. If you're getting $3, $4, $5 an MCF in the pipeline, then maybe you just sell to the pipeline. But if it's currently where we are now, Henry Hub and Waha is not very attractive for natural gas operators. They may actually make more money mining Bitcoin. So that natural gas then just goes to a generator that's on site, and the generator converts it into electricity that is used to then mine Bitcoin also on site. So the Bitcoin mining containers and machines would be there on site in sort of a shipping, like a 40-foot shipping container.
Right.
Now that's one way. The other way is to use formerly flared gas or vented gas, that there is no pipeline. This is just pure wasted energy. And so you would redirect that flare stack to the generator and mine Bitcoin from that. And we actually passed a bill in Texas, House Bill 591, that clarified that you wouldn't have to pay severance tax on that transaction because it's formerly flared gas. There was no taxes being paid on that anyways. And then you can then redirect it to have a profitable enterprise off of your formerly unprofitable asset.
So what does the operator get out of that? I mean, when you set up one of these contracts?
Well, they negotiate the sale of the gas. So if it's formerly flared gas, then they're probably negotiating, somewhere between $0 and $2 an MCF.
I see.
Nobody's taking zero, obviously, but somewhere in that range where they're making, say, $1 an MCF, whereas before they were making zero. In the other situation where you're mining it from the pipeline, you always have to, take into consideration what the operator is getting at the pipeline. And so the miner has to pay more than the pipeline would be paying. And so you may be a way to hedge your what you're getting at the hub or what you're getting from the pipeline operator. And the Bitcoin miner is saying, hey, I'll pay you for this gas, at $4 an MCF. And we're still going to make money because Bitcoin mining right now is returning about $6 an MCF from mining. So there's some arbitrage there as well.
So it works really well where there's not adequate pipeline capacity to move the natural gas. Like West Texas had a big issue with that a couple of years ago, where they were producing so much oil, and of course the byproduct is natural gas. So they were actually having to pay the pipeline company to take their natural gas in some instances, right? Because the pipeline company, were full, so they didn't really want the natural gas anyway. But I think the state requires you to not to flare your gas, or in certain circumstances you can flare, correct? So it's a big added benefit to the producer also.
Absolutely. And you're right that getting one of those flare permits is not always easy. And it's preferable to be able to have a way to get rid of that gas without having any cost or without having to pay the pipeline operator. But then, if you're able to monetize it, all the better.
So on an MCF basis, how much natural gas would you need to run one of these facilities?
That is a great question. So I speak more in terms of kilowatts and megawatts than I do in MCF. So what I do know though is that you will need, any operation like this is likely going to be between 500 kilowatts and 1.5 megawatts at the well site. So whatever amount of natural gas is needed for that, you have a generator, say a 1 megawatt generator, you need to feed that with natural gas anytime you're running the machines. And I have some colleagues that are from the oil industry that could tell me exactly how many NCF would be needed for that. But I think about grid stuff a lot more than I think about natural gas.
So let's talk about that. I mean, how does it impact the grid when you're generating these Bitcoins? I mean, do you sell to the grid still, or basically do you just, well, I guess you have to, right? Because you're generating electricity, which is creating the Bitcoins, correct?
Yeah, for the on-grid miners, they are energy consumers, so they buy electricity from the retail electric providers, and they also have options to work with ERCOT, which is the Texas grid operator, and in other states they work in PJM as well, up in the Midwest, or MISO, or wherever it is, where they can monetize some of their optionality by selling their energy as a service to the grid. It's called ancillary services in ERCOT. So they would agree to turn off at a certain strike price, or agree to not use their electricity in return for energy credits or payments from the grid operator. And so the grid miners are competitive anywhere from there's some that have as low as 2 cents a kilowatt hour power, and some that have as high as 7 or 8 cents a kilowatt hour. And that's usually their net power cost after considering the money that they make, or the energy credits that they make on their ancillary services and the operations that they do to kind of monetize their energy optionality.
I see. Well, that's an interesting topic. I wanted to ask a question. Can the US dollar be used in blockchain transactions, or does blockchain require digital currency?
That's a great question. There are some things that are called stable coins that are simply just mimicking US dollars, but they run on blockchain rails. So in a stablecoin situation like USDC, if I want $100 of USDC, I'll take $100 and I'll ACH it to Circle, and they will put it in the Bank of New York Mellon, and that $100 will sit there, and I'll get $100 of USDC, and I'll do what I need to do with it, transactions, commerce, etc. And if ever I wanted to trade that back, it's 100% backed by US dollars, so I could then convert it back at some point if I needed to. So in that way, the US dollar does play a big role in these kinds of transactions. So it's a little bit different than Bitcoin, which is, you can see the price of Bitcoin denominated in dollars, but doesn't necessarily have anything to do with dollars. So we are fully supportive of the dollar remaining the world's reserve currency for as long as possible. I'm a little bit concerned about the profligate spending in DC that is making that unlikely. And we do see some transactions in energy markets where the dollar is no longer the medium of clearing those transactions.
Yeah, I've read about that lately. In fact, I was on a conference call earlier where we were talking about BRICS, and how some of the countries like Saudi Arabia and the UAE, and I think now they've even invited Iran, that they're willing to take at least some of their, for example, the yuan for energy that they're selling to China, but they still want to use the US dollar, but I guess China is one of their largest customers, so they're willing to appease them on that. Do you think that this will also, this blockchain help to keep the dollar as the number one currency?
Well, there's a couple ways that it could. One way is these stable coins. There's about $120 billion of stable coins in circulation, and 99% of them use the dollar, which is a much higher rate than international transactions writ large. So what the stablecoin issuers will do is they'll take all the dollars, put it in BNY Mellon or whatever bank, or they'll put it in a money market, they'll put it in treasuries. So they are a forced buyer of US debt. And we need more forced buyers of US debt right now because there's a lot of sellers. And servicing costs on our debt as a country is skyrocketing. We're over 100% debt to GDP currently, and it's growing. So eventually, when stable coins become larger, they can be a significant help to the US dollar because they're buying a lot of US debt. and they're locking up a lot of dollars in these contracts, these smart contracts, and so that's creating more demand for dollars, which is what we need. We want global demand for dollars, in fact, today the stablecoin market actually buys more U.S. debt than Saudi Arabia.
Wow.
So we're the 15th largest buyer, as far as not me personally, but the stablecoin industry in general is the 15th largest buyer of U.S. debt on a per country basis. So there's only 15 countries that buy more U.S. debt than stablecoins.
So how would the U.S. economy be impacted if oil and gas, were transferred with blockchain?
Well, if it was done on stablecoins and they were U.S. dollar-backed stablecoins, there would be no change. It would be simply that these transactions were clearing in U.S. dollar stablecoins, and those dollars were locked up in U.S. banks. So there would be no change there. It would not be healthy, in my opinion, for transactions globally to be cleared in digital yuan, which is a blockchain-based, yuan. The Communist Party is pushing that on their Belt and Road countries across the world, and they're sure pushing that for BRICS countries and OPEC countries. So we would not want to see that. I'm a little bit neutral on transactions being cleared in Bitcoin. I don't think they will be, just because of the volatility of Bitcoin. So I think stablecoins is a more likely avenue, and that really, since it's a dollar representation, it does not have any change on whether the dollar remains the world reserve currency or not. So if we move to a stablecoin clearing of energy transactions, there's really no change because the dollar amount is the same. Those dollars are just locked up there at various large U.S. banks. So I think that's the most likely outcome. And if the dollar is to lose its world reserve currency status, it would certainly be because of the monetary expansion that we see from the Fed, or that we've seen from the Fed in the last couple of years. If they don't get that under control, that's really where the risk lies, in the dollar losing its reserve currency status.
So when you talk about stable coin, you read a lot about the U.S. wanting, or actually the world wanting to go to this digital currency. I mean, is that what we're talking about? Is it something like stable coin, or is it, is that, I guess if you could explain that.
That's a great question, because there's some nuance there that I'd like to talk about. One is a stable coin, which is a privately issued representation of a dollar.
Okay.
We're very supportive of that innovation. What we are not supportive of is a centrally issued, what they call a central bank digital currency. And that uses blockchain, but sort of uses it in an abomination, right? It uses it in a negative way. A central bank digital currency is a centralized issuance of a digital currency directly to consumers of that country. And unfortunately, the U.S. Federal Reserve and MIT are currently investigating or researching what that would look like. And the Fed could create their own digital currency. And in my opinion, that's dangerous for privacy reasons, all sorts of dystopian 1984 type concerns around privacy. And, China has been experimenting with a digital yuan that's based on blockchain, and they are able to impose a negative interest rate on, if they need to. They are able to issue digital yuan to maybe a disaster zone that has an expiration date. So that money has to be spent in 30 days, or else it expires out of your bank account. So there's a lot of things that are concerning to me in relation to a digital currency.
No, I agree with you 100%. I'm not for that at all. I just didn't understand how all of the Bitcoin, the stable coins, and all of these coins work. But that was a good explanation that they're actually private coins. They're backed by the U.S. dollar. The stable coin is, and of course, the digital currency is something completely different. But when you look at BRICS, now they've invited 6 new nations. They've invited Saudi Arabia and some of the oil producing. I mean, are they trying to? I guess they're coming up with one currency, and I guess there's fighting amongst themselves about which currency is to be used, but they're willing to take payment for some of these products, in their own currencies. What benefit is that to people, in your opinion?
Well, I think it strengthens their currency at the expense of the dollar, which is concerning, I think, to all of us. What I would say is the politics of this are anybody that supports privacy, that supports individual liberty, and things like that are not going to be supportive of a central bank digital currency. But they would be supportive, or hopefully one day we'll see that a privately issued stablecoin from a bank or a other financial services entity that is backed by the dollar is and in combination with Bitcoin. Bitcoin, of course, is more of a digital gold type asset, or a hedge and a store of value. Those two assets are far more influential and powerful from a geopolitical perspective and from a U.S. national security perspective in ensuring that the dollar remains the world reserve currency. And so it is concerning that we would see, BRICS nations banding together to create their own digital currency, or maybe they have a basket of their own currencies and they tokenize it. And so that's the digital currency that they use, is a basket of rubles and digital yuan and other assets. That's certainly at odds with our national security interest in the U.S.
So do you see in the future a lot of these digital coins consolidating into one coin, or are they going to continue just to have these different denominations?
I would say that most cryptocurrencies that exist today will go away. Just like, in the dot-com era, there was a lot of things that went away that were just attempts at, the internet was this big new thing, and some of those things stuck, and we got Amazon and Google and some big companies out of that. Same thing with cryptocurrency. I think Bitcoin and Ethereum are here to stay no matter what. There'll be some of the smaller coins that go away because they don't gain mass adoption. And Bitcoin and Ethereum are really doing two different things. Bitcoin is money. It's digital gold. It's gold that runs on the rails of the internet. Ethereum is more of a smart contract, programmable blockchain asset that helps a decentralized, business layer, a decentralized business layer of the internet work. So Ethereum is not really trying to be money. And then stable coins are just an extension of the US dollar. And we can't go back to a time when all energy transactions, all oil transactions are cleared in dollars, or in physical dollars. And when I say physical, I include ACH, digital dollars, but not on a blockchain rail, like on a traditional rails. What we will see is, if the U.S. doesn't adopt privately issued stable coins, then there is some risk that the U.S. would attempt to use a central bank digital currency, which is also a representation of a dollar, but that is as I mentioned earlier, kind of concerning for us from a privacy perspective.
Right.
Because the risk is, if they don't do either of those two things, 5 years from now, maybe only 60%, 50% of global energy transactions are cleared in dollars, and the rest are cleared in yuan or some basket of BRICS currencies like you were talking about.
So what is the risk of buying energy with blockchain? Or are there risks?
Well, so again, if you buy it with a stable coin, it is no different than buying it with a dollar.
Okay.
So it is simply just a faster way to transact. So stable coins, I could send you $1 million of stable coins. It could clear in a matter of minutes, and the fees could be less than $1. So it's much more efficient than, say, ACH or SWIFT, faster and cheaper. And so if it's in that instance, there's really not any risk. Now, if you're trying to clear transactions in Bitcoin and people are buying energy in Bitcoin, Bitcoin's a pretty good asset, but it's not a very good, it's not a stable asset. It has volatility to it. So there is volatility and counterparty risk if you're trying to clear energy transactions in Bitcoin, which I don't think, will happen that often just because of the volatility. If I'm paying you in Bitcoin and before you're able to, you're selling me $1 million worth of oil, I send you $1 million worth of Bitcoin, but Bitcoin goes down by 5%, while that transaction is happening, and before you can convert it into dollars or into your currency, then you've lost 5% of your proceeds on the deal. So there are risks for Bitcoin, which is why I think stable coins is probably a more likely. The dollar is always becoming less valuable because of inflation, but the speed of that purchasing power erosion is very slow. So if that happens over years, not minutes, whereas Bitcoin can lose 5% or gain 5% in a matter of minutes.
So how do these downgrades in the U.S. Credit rating? I mean, does that affect stablecoin or not?
Not necessarily. It's certainly not good for us as a country. I think the Moody's, was it Moody's or S&P? I think whichever one downgraded us cited political instability and the inability of both parties to work together on achieving monetary stability in their report when they downgraded us. So there are certainly some concerns there, but it wouldn't really affect the blockchain industry or stablecoins or Bitcoin in any meaningful way.
So the only thing that could really affect it, I guess, or affect what we call the petrodollar, is if they do start accepting other currencies, and they do get, and when I say they, talking about BRICS, if more and more nations decide to join that, then that's going to drive down the value of the dollar, which would also impact, I guess, stablecoin, right?
Right. Yeah, that would, I mean, the stable coins are married 100% to the value of a dollar. So every stable coin in circulation has a dollar behind it. And if the dollar loses 10% of its purchasing power, then the stable coin loses correspondingly 10% of its purchasing power.
So why do you think the U.S. has kind of fought against embracing these stable coins? I mean, you don't hear a lot about it in the news, but obviously there hasn't been a lot of support for them either, correct?
Yeah, I think that is true. The United States government is currently considering whether or not they should implement a central bank digital currency, which we talked about earlier. Now, if they were to do that, the U.S. central bank digital currency would be a competitor to stablecoins, even though the U.S. national security interest is served by stablecoins, because, like we talked about, they buy a lot of U.S. debt.
Right.
It would still be somewhat of a competitor. So, in my opinion, they're weighing their options here. And if they do decide to put forward a central bank digital currency, which I think they will attempt to do, they're benefiting from stablecoins being weaker. And so, in my opinion, we need to grow the usage of stablecoins before a central bank digital currency is pushed on us, so that the federal government will allow them to exist side by side, and we can choose as consumers, how are we going to spend our dollars? Are we going to spend them in stable coins, or are we going to spend them in CBDCs, central bank digital currency?
Well, it's certainly an interesting topic, Lee. Can you tell our listeners how to follow you?
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm on Twitter at Lee_Bratcher, and our website is texasblockchaincouncil.org. We do a lot of advocacy and regulatory work in ERCOT, and so I think you probably have a lot of listeners in Texas, and they're looking at the ERCOT market, and as are we. We are very much interested in making sure that Bitcoin miners that use on-grid energy are using it in a responsible way, and are pushing that energy back into the grid in times of high prices and grid stress. So that's probably a topic for another day.
Yeah, no, that's great. I didn't really understand a lot of the topics, before we got on the show, but after you've explained them, now I get a better understanding of how actually blockchain works and how it works with the energy industry. One last question. I mean, has the utilities been supportive of blockchain?
Well, it's a little mixed. The utilities see the additional load that Bitcoin mining is bringing to the grid. There's 2,200 megawatts of Bitcoin mining in Texas, so it's quite substantial. So when the Bitcoin miner is responsible and able to post significant collateral, it's a really good thing for the utility because they're actually raking in significantly more revenue from that, from their tariffs there. But if the Bitcoin miner is not posting significant collateral or is not building out their site to what the utility thought they would, there could be a mismatch there where the utility invested quite a bit in transmission infrastructure, but they're not making as much money. So I would say on the whole, they're pleased with it, but there are a few isolated incidents where there's been some frustration.
So how does it work with these wind and solar? I mean, obviously, is there a competition between the generating the Bitcoins or getting onto the grid between the green energy? Is there competition out there between those groups?
Not really, because what the Bitcoin miners will do is they'll go locate next to a big renewable generation site, whether it's wind or solar, and they'll be a primary buyer of that electricity. For example, wind really struggles with transmission capacity, right? In West Texas, we have about 15 gigawatts worth of wind energy if the wind's blowing, and only about 8 gigawatts of transmission capacity. So they'll take the grid will take all they can get, but there is some curtailment that happens of wind energy. So the Bitcoin miner will go out there and say, hey, we'll buy your wind energy for a couple cents a kilowatt hour. And if you're going to make more selling it to the grid, then we'll shut off and you can sell it to the grid. But if there's a constraint in transmission capacity, then we'll take that excess and you'll make something for it rather than making nothing. In a very similar way that the Bitcoin miners are very symbiotic to the flare gas piece, is very similar to how it works with wind energy.
So what does one of these facilities cost? The Bitcoin operator, I mean, to set one up, say if you're going to buy flare gas, I mean, how much, what do you have a number on that?
Well, if you're looking at all in machines, energy infrastructure, containers, all of that stuff, an easy metric to think about is about $1 million a megawatt.
I see.
And it varies significantly if you're doing immersion cooling or air cooling, but an easy figure. So, if you had a 300 megawatt site, you'd be looking at 300 million plus to put that site together.
Wow. And what does a payout look like on one of those?
Well, that very much depends on the price of Bitcoin. In the bull market, you're paying it off in like 2 years.
Oh.
In the bear market, you could take, it could take 20 or 30 years. So what we need, the bull markets and the bear markets sort of even themselves out. And, I think most operators are expecting about a 7 or 8 year,
it sounds like similar to oil and gas. We'd love to have the stable price, but that never happens, right?
It's almost exactly. It's a commodity market to a T. It very much mimics oil and gas.
Well, Lee, it was great to have you on the show. I'd sure love to have you back in the future. And thanks again for all the information.